I never thought my own sister would ban me from sitting inside her wedding ceremony, forcing me to watch through windows like some uninvited stranger. But when I discovered the real reason behind her cruelty, it didn't just destroy her perfect day. It brought down an empire built on lies that had fooled everyone for decades. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The phone call came on a rainy Thursday evening in March. I was grading papers at my kitchen table, red pen in hand, when my sister Sophia's name flashed across my screen. We hadn't spoken in 3 months, not since our last disastrous family dinner, where she'd made another cutting remark about my lifestyle choices. Maya? Her voice was crisp, professional, the tone she used when discussing business deals at her marketing firm. I'm calling about the wedding details. I set down my pen and leaned back in my chair. Sophia's engagement to Derek Montgomery had been the talk of our family for 8 months. Derek was everything our parents had dreamed of in a son-in-law. Harvard MBA, trust fund, family name that appeared on hospital wings and museum plaques throughout Boston. The perfect match for their perfect daughter. What about the wedding details? I asked, already sensing the conversation wouldn't go smoothly. The venue has capacity restrictions we didn't anticipate, Sophia said, her words measured and careful. The indoor ceremony space is limited, and we need to make some adjustments to the guest list arrangement. I waited, knowing there was more coming. Sophia never called just to share logistical updates. We've set up a beautiful viewing area on the terrace, she continued. You'll have a lovely view of the ceremony through the French doors. The weather forecast is perfect, so you'll actually have a better experience than being cramped inside with everyone else. The words hit me like ice water. You want me to sit outside during your wedding ceremony? It's not outside, Maya. It's the terrace. There's a canopy, comfortable seating, and you'll still be part of everything, just from a different vantage point. I stood up, pacing to my small apartment's window that overlooked the parking lot of my complex. 28 years old, and my sister was essentially asking me to watch her wedding from the porch, like a child who hadn't earned a seat at the adult table. Who else is sitting on this terrace? I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. Sophia hesitated. Just you and maybe a few others who understand the space limitations. What others? Maya, don't make this more complicated than it needs to be. The important thing is that you're there, that you're part of my special day. I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar ache that came with every interaction with my family. The constant reminder that I was somehow less than, somehow not quite worthy of the same consideration given to everyone else. Why me, Sophia? Why am I the one who has to sit outside? Another pause. When she spoke again, her voice carried that condescending edge I'd come to recognize over the years. Maya, you know how these events work. There are certain expectations, certain people who need to be positioned appropriately. Derek's family, our business associates, the people who matter for our future. The people who matter. The phrase hung in the air between us like a physical blow. And I don't matter? Of course you matter. You're my sister, but you have to understand that this wedding is about more than just family sentiment. Derek's launching his political career next year. Every detail matters, every impression counts. I sank back into my chair, staring at the stack of second-grade art projects I'd been grading. Bright, honest drawings full of joy and creativity, made by children who still believed the world was fair and kind. How different my life looked from theirs, how much smaller. I need to think about this, I said finally. Maya, please don't be dramatic. It's one ceremony, a few hours at most. The reception is in the same space, so you'll be with everyone else for the party. This is just about the ceremony seating. Dramatic. Another word that had followed me through childhood, adolescence, and apparently into adulthood. Anytime expressed hurt or disagreement with how I was treated, I was being dramatic. "I'll let you know," I said, and hung up before she could respond. I sat in my kitchen for a long time after that call, surrounded by the papers I needed to grade, the quiet hum of my refrigerator the only sound in the small space I called home. My apartment was nothing like the sprawling colonial where I'd grown up. Nothing like the luxury condo Sophia had purchased in Back Bay with Derek. It was small, affordable, and mine. The first place I'd ever lived that felt like it belonged to me rather than being on loan from people who might revoke the privilege at any moment. Teaching second grade at Roosevelt Elementary wasn't glamorous work, but it fed something essential in me. Every morning, 23 little faces looked up at me with trust and expectation. They didn't care that I drove a 12-year-old Honda or that my clothes came from Target instead of boutiques. They cared that I helped them read new words, that I celebrated when they mastered multiplication tables, that I listened when they had problems at home. But somehow, in my family's eyes, spending my days with 7-year-olds made me less serious, less successful, less worthy of respect than Sophia's work managing social media campaigns for luxury brands. The next morning brought a text from my mother. "Sophia told me about the wedding arrangement. I think it's lovely that you'll have your own special viewing area. Very thoughtful of her to plan something unique for you." I stared at the message, wondering if my mother actually believed what she'd written, or if she was just committed to maintaining the family fiction that everything Sophia did was perfect and considerate. My mother, Linda, had spent my entire childhood making excuses for Sophia's behavior while holding me to impossible standards. When Sophia cut my hair with craft scissors in 3rd grade, it was because she was just playing and didn't understand. When I retaliated by hiding her favorite doll, I was grounded for a week for being vindictive and mean-spirited. When Sophia threw a tantrum at my high school graduation because the ceremony was boring and too long, my parents sympathized with her discomfort. When I asked if we could leave my college graduation early because I had a severe migraine, I was told I was being selfish and ungrateful. The patterns had continued into adulthood with increasing sophistication. Sophia's achievements were celebrated with family dinners and expensive gifts. My teaching award last year was acknowledged with a brief phone call and a suggestion that maybe now I could think about moving up to administration or something more substantial. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I called my best friend Jessica during my lunch break, sitting in my empty classroom while the kids played outside. "She wants you to sit outside?" Jessica's voice carried the outrage I couldn't quite muster myself. "At her own wedding?" "On the terrace," I corrected weakly. "With a canopy." "Maya, you know this is insane, right? You know that normal families don't treat each other this way?" Jessica had been saying variations of this for years. She'd grown up in a chaotic but loving household with 4 siblings, where differences were celebrated rather than used as ammunition. She'd witnessed enough of my family interactions to recognize the dysfunction I'd been trained to accept as normal. "It's just one day," I said, repeating the rationalization I'd been practicing since Sophia's call. "It's never just one day with them. It's always something. Remember your birthday dinner when Sophia spent the entire meal talking about her promotion? Remember Christmas when your parents gave her a car and gave you a gift card to TJ Maxx?" I did remember. I remembered all of it. The accumulated weight of years of small slights and casual dismissals. But acknowledging the pattern felt dangerous. Like opening a door I might not be able to close again. "Maybe I just won't go," I said quietly. "And miss your only sister's wedding?" "Maya, that's not the answer either. You'd regret it forever, and they'd use it as proof that you're selfish and unsupportive." She was right, of course. My family had a talent for creating impossible situations where every choice felt wrong. That evening, I called my father at his office. David Carter was a successful real estate developer who'd built his company from nothing, a fact he mentioned frequently, as evidence of his superior character and judgment. He'd always been more approachable than my mother, though his support usually came with conditions. "Dad, can we talk about Sophia's wedding?" "Of course, sweetheart. What's on your mind?" I explained the seating situation, trying to keep my voice neutral and reasonable. My father listened without interrupting, a habit from his business negotiations. "I see," he said when I finished. "And how do you feel about this arrangement?" The question surprised me. Usually, family discussions focused on what was practical or appropriate, not on feelings. Honestly, I feel like I'm being excluded. Like, I'm not important enough to sit with the rest of the family during the ceremony. My father was quiet for a moment. "Maya, I need you to understand something about where Derek comes from. His family moves in very specific circles, has very particular expectations about how things should be done. This wedding isn't just about Sophia and Derek. It's about bringing two families together, about making the right impressions for Derek's future career. But I'm not some embarrassing relative, Dad. I'm Sophia's sister. I have a college degree, a steady job. I'm not going to embarrass anyone." "Of course not, sweetheart. But you have to understand that optics matter in Derek's world. The guest list, the seating arrangements, even the wedding party selections all send messages about the family's priorities and values." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. What messages would my presence send? Another pause. "Maya, you know I'm proud of what you do. Teaching is important work. But Derek's family includes senators, federal judges, Fortune 500 executives. Sophia needs to position herself appropriately within that context. Position herself, as if family relationships were strategic business decisions. So I'm bad for her image. You're not bad for anything. You're just different. And sometimes, in situations like this, different can be complicated." After hanging up with my father, I sat on my couch looking through old photo albums I kept in a storage box under my coffee table. Pictures from childhood vacations, birthday parties, family, holidays. In most of them, Sophia commanded the center of the frame while I hovered at the edges, smiling dutifully, but somehow never quite belonging to the scene. There was the photo from Sophia's Sweet 16 party, where I was clearly visible but standing, behind a group of her friends holding a purse someone had asked me to watch. The picture from our family trip to Europe when I was 15, where Sophia and my mother posed elegantly in front of the Eiffel Tower while I stood several feet away, holding our shopping bags. Image after image of the same dynamic. Sophia as the star, me as the supporting cast member whose primary function was to make her shine brighter by comparison. I'd never questioned this arrangement as a child. It had seemed as natural as the fact that Sophia had the bigger bedroom, the newer clothes, the first choice of activities during family outings. She was older, more confident, more naturally suited to being the center of attention. I'd accepted my role as the quiet, helpful sister who made things easier for everyone else. But somewhere in my early 20s, I'd started to notice how exhausting it was to always be accommodating. Always be understanding. Always be the one who sacrificed her needs for family harmony. The realization had come gradually, through conversations with friends, through watching other families interact, through the simple recognition that I never felt truly relaxed or myself during family gatherings. The wedding invitation sat on my kitchen counter for 3 days while I wrestled with my decision. It was beautiful, printed on thick cream paper with elegant gold lettering. "The honor of your presence is requested at the marriage of Sophia Catherine Carter to Derek James Montgomery." My name was handwritten in calligraphy on the inner envelope. Miss Maya Carter. Not Maya Carter and guest, I noticed. Sophia. Had made it clear that bringing a date would complicate the seating arrangements even further. Never mind that I'd been dating Alex, a fellow teacher, for 8 months. Never mind that he'd been hoping to meet my family, to understand more about the people who'd shaped me. I couldn't bring myself to tell Alex about the seating situation. How could I explain that my own sister considered me unsuitable for her ceremony's interior? How could I make him understand that this was somehow normal in my family, just another small accommodation I was expected to make for the greater good? Instead, I told him the wedding was family only, immediate relatives for an intimate ceremony. He seemed disappointed but understanding, offering to take me out to dinner the night before to celebrate Sophia's happiness. His kindness made the lie feel even worse. By Saturday morning, I still hadn't given Sophia a definitive answer about attending. My phone buzzed with increasingly urgent messages from my mother about finalizing head counts and seating arrangements. The pressure was familiar. The assumption that my compliance was inevitable once enough family obligation was applied. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror that morning, holding the navy blue dress I'd purchased specifically for the wedding. It was more expensive than anything else in my closet, bought with the hope that looking appropriately elegant might somehow earn me a seat at the actual ceremony table. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd spent money I didn't really have to meet standards that ultimately didn't matter anyway. My reflection looked tired, uncertain. 28 years of family gatherings had taught me to read my own face for signs of potential criticism. Was my makeup too bold or too subtle? Would my hair seem appropriately polished or trying too hard? Did my dress convey the right balance of festive and understated? The questions felt suddenly ridiculous. I was getting dressed to sit outside my sister's wedding like an uninvited guest, worrying about meeting standards set by people who'd already decided I wasn't worth including. I called Sophia one more time. "Maya, thank goodness," she answered. Immediately. "I need to give final numbers to the caterer. You're coming, right? To the terrace viewing area? Can I ask you something honestly?" "Of course." "If one of Derek's sisters were in my position, would she be sitting outside too?" Sophia's silence stretched long enough that I knew the answer. "That's different, Maya. Derek's sisters understand the social expectations. They know how to navigate these situations appropriately. And I don't? You're more comfortable in casual settings. You always have been. Remember how overwhelmed you got at the Hendersons' anniversary party last year? This way you can enjoy the ceremony without feeling pressured by all the formal protocols." The Hendersons' party, where I'd felt out of place because everyone else seemed to know an elaborate set of unspoken rules about conversation topics, appropriate compliments, and social positioning. Where I'd spent most of the evening helping serve appetizers because it gave me something useful to do instead of standing awkwardly by the bar. "You're making this decision for my comfort. I'm making this decision for everyone's comfort, including yours." The phrase hung between us, heavy with implication. Everyone's comfort required my exclusion. My presence inside the ceremony would somehow diminish the experience for people who mattered more than I did. "I need to go," I said. "Maya, please, don't make this harder than it needs to be. Just say yes. Say you'll be there, on the terrace, supporting me on my special day." I looked around my small apartment, at the student artwork covering my refrigerator, at the stack of library books on my coffee table, at the simple, honest life I'd built for myself away from my family's elaborate standards and impossible expectations. "I'll be there," I said finally. But even as I spoke the words, something inside me was already planning a different kind of attendance than the one Sophia expected. Something that would finally force my family to see the cost of their casual cruelty. The price of treating one daughter as decorative and the other as disposable. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I was going to Sophia's wedding, but not to sit quietly on the terrace while more important people celebrated inside. I was going to make a choice that would finally show my family what their treatment actually looked like when reflected back at them. I put on the navy dress, applied my makeup with unusual care, and drove toward the most expensive venue in Boston, knowing that by the end of the day, everything between my family and me would be permanently changed. Some relationships can't survive the weight of accumulated disrespect, and mine with the Carter family was about to reach its breaking point. What I didn't know was that my decision to finally stand up for myself would expose secrets that had shaped our family dynamics. For decades, secrets that would destroy more than just Sophia's perfect wedding day. Sometimes the person demanding the most respect has the most to hide, and sometimes walking away from cruelty reveals truths that change everything. The Fairmont Copley Plaza stood like a monument to old Boston elegance, its limestone facade and grand entrance promising the kind of luxury that had intimidated me since childhood. Valets in crisp uniforms directed arriving guests, while photographers positioned themselves strategically to capture the parade of expensive cars and designer gowns that would define Sophia's wedding coverage in the society pages. I pulled my 12-year-old Honda into the valet line, watching the attendant's expression shift from professional courtesy to barely concealed confusion as he took in my modest vehicle among the Bentleys and Mercedes that surrounded it. The contrast felt symbolic of everything wrong with this day, everything wrong with my place in this family. "Welcome to the Montgomery Carter wedding," he said politely, handing me a claim ticket. "The ceremony will be in the grand ballroom, on the second floor." "Thank you," I replied, knowing I wouldn't be seeing the inside of that ballroom despite my name being on the guest list. The hotel lobby buzzed with wedding activity. Clusters of guests in formal attire moved toward the elevators while hotel staff guided them with practiced efficiency. I recognized several faces from previous family events. Derek's college friends who'd grown into young professionals with inherited confidence. Family friends whose children attended private schools and summer camps that cost more than my annual salary. None of them acknowledged me, though I caught a few curious glances at my dress. It was beautiful. I knew that objectively, but it lacked the effortless elegance that seemed to emanate from the other women present. Their outfits spoke a language of understated luxury that I'd never learned to speak fluently. Designer pieces chosen not to impress, but to signal belonging to a world where impressing was unnecessary. I took the elevator to the second floor, following signs toward the grand ballroom. The hallway was carpeted in deep burgundy with gilded mirrors reflecting the soft lighting from crystal sconces. Everything about the space whispered money, tradition, the kind of establishment that had been hosting society weddings for generations. Near the ballroom entrance, I spotted a familiar figure arranging seating charts at a small table. Caroline, Mitchell, Derek's cousin and the wedding coordinator, looked up as I approached. Her smile was warm, but carried an undertone of nervous energy. "Maya, wonderful to see you," she said, consulting her tablet. "I have you seated in our special viewing. Let me walk you there personally. Special viewing area." The euphemism felt more insulting each time I heard it. Caroline led me past the open doors of the grand ballroom, and I caught a glimpse of the ceremony space that had been deemed too exclusive for my presence. White chairs arranged in perfect rows faced an altar decorated with cascading white roses and greenery. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over guests who were already taking their seats, the space filled with quiet conversation and the rustle of expensive fabric. My parents sat in the front row, my mother radiant in a champagne-colored silk dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. My father looked distinguished in his tailored tuxedo, already deep in conversation with a man I recognized as Derek's father, Senator James Montgomery. They looked like they belonged, like they'd been born to occupy those front row seats at society weddings. "Here we are," Caroline announced, opening French doors that led to a covered terrace. "Your private viewing area." The space was beautiful, I had to admit. A small section of the hotel's outdoor terrace had been arranged with white chairs and small tables, decorated with smaller versions of the floral arrangements from inside. Gauzy white fabric had been draped overhead to create an elegant canopy, and space heaters ensured comfort despite the April chill. Through the glass doors, we had a clear view of the ceremony space. "The audio system extends out here," Caroline explained, adjusting a small speaker mounted near the doors. You'll hear everything perfectly, and honestly, you might have a better view than some of the people inside. I was the only person in the viewing area. Are others joining me out here? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Caroline's smile flickered slightly. Well, we had thought perhaps a few more guests might prefer the outdoor option, but it seems everyone else was comfortable with the indoor arrangement. So I was alone. Completely. Obviously alone in the special viewing area created specifically to exclude me from my own sister's wedding ceremony. The bathroom is just back through those doors if you need it, Caroline continued, her professional cheerfulness starting to sound strained. And I'll check on you periodically to make sure you have everything you need. After Caroline left, I sat in one of the white chairs and looked through the glass doors at the ceremony preparation inside. Guests continued to arrive and take their seats, air-kissing and embracing with the casual familiarity of people who saw each other regularly at similar events. The wedding photographer moved through the space, capturing candid moments of anticipation and joy. Nobody looked toward the terrace. Nobody seemed to notice or wonder about the solitary figure sitting outside like a child banished from the adult celebration. My phone buzzed with a text from Alex. Hope your sister's wedding is beautiful. Can't wait to hear all about it tonight. I stared at the message, wondering how I would possibly describe this experience to someone who came from a normal family, someone whose relatives included him in celebrations, rather than creating elaborate schemes to exclude him. How could I explain that I was currently sitting alone outside my sister's wedding ceremony, watching through windows like an uninvited observer? The string quartet inside began playing, signaling that the ceremony was about to begin. Through the glass, I watched the officiant take his place at the altar, while guests settled into expectant silence. The music shifted to the processional, and Derek appeared from a side door, looking handsome and confident in his tailored tuxedo. He walked to the altar with the easy grace of someone who'd never doubted his place in any room, never questioned whether he belonged at the center of important moments. His groomsmen followed, a collection of Harvard classmates and family friends who would undoubtedly become the next generation of political and business leaders. The bridesmaids came next, Sophia's sorority sisters and Derek's female cousins, gliding down the aisle in flowing lavender dresses. They all looked like variations on the same theme, polished and poised with the confidence that came from lives of privilege and certainty. Then the music swelled for the bridal entrance, and everyone inside rose to their feet. Sophia appeared in the doorway on my father's arm, and even from my position outside, I could see that she was absolutely stunning. Her dress was a masterpiece, of understated elegance, probably custom designed to complement her tall, slender frame. Her dark hair was arranged in an intricate updo that must have taken hours to perfect, and even from a distance, her makeup looked flawless. She moved down the aisle with practiced grace, smiling at guests who turned to admire her passage. My father beamed with pride as he escorted her, his posture straight and dignified. When they reached the altar, he kissed her cheek gently before placing her hand in Derek's and taking his seat beside my mother. The ceremony proceeded with all the traditional elements I'd attended countless times at other weddings. The officiant spoke about love and commitment while Sophia and Derek gazed at each other with obvious adoration. They exchanged rings and personal vows that made several guests reach for tissues. When Derek kissed his bride, the room erupted in applause and celebration. Through it all, I sat alone on the terrace, watching my sister's most important moment, through glass barriers that might as well have been prison walls. As guests began filing out for cocktail hour, I remained in my chair, unsure of the protocol for my situation. Was I supposed to join the reception now, or was there another special area where unwanted family members were expected to wait? Caroline appeared at the French doors, her earlier nervousness replaced by what looked like genuine discomfort. Maya, how was the ceremony? You had such a lovely view. It was beautiful, I said truthfully. Sophia looked perfect, She really did. Now, for cocktail hour, we have you seated at the family table in the main reception space. Table 1, right up front with your parents and the wedding party. I blinked in surprise. After being excluded from the ceremony, I was now expected to seamlessly integrate into the family section for the reception, as if the previous hour of isolation had never happened. Table 1. Yes, Sophia was very specific about having you close for the reception. She wanted to make sure you felt included in all the celebration activities. The irony was staggering. After spending an hour watching through windows, I was now expected to take my place as a cherished family member for the parts of the event where my exclusion might be more obvious to other guests. I followed Caroline back through the hotel corridors to the reception space, another grand room that had been transformed into a wedding paradise. Round tables covered in white linens filled the space, each topped with elaborate centerpieces of white roses, orchids, and eucalyptus. Crystal glasses caught the light from massive chandeliers, and the overall effect was breathtakingly elegant. Table 1 sat directly in front of the head table where Sophia and Derek would dine with their wedding party. Place cards in calligraphy marked each seat. My parents, Derek's parents, his grandparents, and various important relatives. My name was positioned between my father and Derek's grandmother, Mrs. Eleanor Montgomery, a formidable woman in her 80s who'd apparently been instrumental in Derek's political ambitions. Maya, darling, my mother appeared at my elbow, her champagne-colored dress rustling as she moved. Wasn't the ceremony just perfect? Sophia looked like a princess. It was lovely, I agreed, not mentioning that I'd watched it through glass doors like a security guard. I'm so glad you were comfortable in the viewing area. Sophia was worried you might feel overwhelmed by all the formal protocol inside. The gaslighting was so smooth, so practiced, that I almost admired its efficiency. In my mother's version of events, my exclusion had been a thoughtful accommodation rather than a deliberate snub. Very comfortable, I said neutrally. Derek's grandmother appeared beside us, moving with the careful dignity of advanced age but sharp, assessing eyes that missed nothing. You must be Maya, she said, extending a gloved hand. I'm Eleanor Montgomery. Derek speaks of you so warmly. I shook her hand, wondering what exactly Derek had said about me since we'd barely exchanged more than polite conversation at family gatherings. It's lovely to meet you, Mrs. Montgomery. Please, call me Eleanor. We're family now. Her smile was polite but measuring, the expression of someone accustomed to evaluating people quickly and thoroughly. I understand you're a teacher. How rewarding that must be. The way she said teacher carried the same tone other people might use for professional dog walker or part-time grocery clerk, acknowledging the occupation while making clear its insignificance in her world. I love working with children, I replied. Second graders are at such a wonderful age for learning. How lovely. Derek's cousin Patricia teaches as well. Of course, she's at Miss Porter's school, but I'm sure public education has its own rewards. The comparison was swift and surgical. Patricia, who taught at one of the most exclusive private schools in New England, versus me, laboring in the public system. The hierarchy was established and my position firmly clarified within the first minute of our conversation. I'm sure it does, I said, declining to defend my career choice to someone who'd already dismissed it. Cocktail hour proceeded with the usual wedding rhythm of small talk and networking disguised as celebration. Guests circulated with drinks and appetizers while the newlyweds mingled, accepting congratulations and posing for photographs. I found myself largely ignored, standing near the family table while conversations flowed around me without including me. The few people who did engage me seemed to treat our interactions as brief obligations rather than genuine interest. Derek's college roommate asked politely about my work, listened to my answer with glazed eyes, then immediately excused himself when someone more interesting appeared. A family friend made conversation about the weather and the beautiful venue before, drifting away mid-sentence when she spotted someone she actually wanted to talk to. I watched my parents work the room with practiced ease, My father discussing business opportunities with Derek's father, while my mother bonded with the Montgomery women over shared experiences of charity work and social obligations. They belonged. Here in a way I clearly didn't, speaking the language of privilege and connection that I'd never quite mastered. Sophia glowed as she moved through the crowd, accepting praise for the ceremony and compliments on her dress. She looked genuinely happy, radiant with the joy of someone whose most important dreams were coming true exactly as planned. When our eyes met across the room, she smiled and waved, the gesture of a gracious bride acknowledging all her guests equally. No acknowledgement of the seating arrangement, no recognition that anything unusual had occurred. In Sophia's world, everything had proceeded perfectly according to plan. Derek appeared at my side during a brief lull in the social circulation, looking every inch the successful groom in his perfectly tailored tuxedo. "Maya, I wanted to thank you for being so understanding about the ceremony arrangements," he said, quietly. "Sophia was worried you might feel excluded, but I told her you'd understand that sometimes these formal events require accommodations for everyone's comfort." His tone was warm and seemingly sincere, but the underlying message was unmistakable. My exclusion had been a favor to me, saving me from discomfort in a setting where I didn't belong. "Of course," I replied. "I wouldn't want to make anyone uncomfortable." That's exactly what I told Sophia. "You've always been so reasonable about these situations." These situations. As if my exclusion from family events was a recurring theme that we all politely ignored for everyone's convenience. "Has this happened before?" I asked, genuinely curious about Derek's perspective on my family dynamics. He looked momentarily confused. "Well, not exactly this, but you know how these formal events can be. There are always considerations about guest comfort, appropriate positioning, making sure everyone feels at ease." I nodded as if this made perfect sense, though internally I was cataloging the implications of his words. In Derek's mind, formal events naturally involved hierarchies and exclusions, and my position in those hierarchies was apparently well established. "I should circulate more," he said, squeezing my arm gently. "But I wanted you to know how much it means to both of us that you're here celebrating with us." After Derek moved away, I excused myself to the restroom, needing a few minutes away from the careful performance required to navigate the reception. The ladies' room was empty except for an elderly woman touching up her lipstick at the mirror. I looked at my reflection and saw someone trying too hard to appear comfortable in an environment that had made clear she didn't belong. My dress was lovely, my makeup carefully applied, my smile practiced and appropriate. But underneath the surface presentation, I looked tired, strained by the effort of pretending everything was normal. The elderly woman finished with her lipstick and turned toward me with a sympathetic expression. "Wedding receptions can be exhausting, can't they?" she said kindly. "All that social energy required." "They can be," I agreed. "I'm Martha Pemberton, Derek's great-aunt. You must be the sister I heard about." The sister I heard about. Not Sophia's sister, not Maya Carter, but the sister I heard about. As if I were a minor character in someone else's story. "Yes, I'm Maya." "I wanted to tell you how sorry I was to hear about the ceremony seating situation. Quite unusual, really. In my day, family was family, regardless of other considerations." Her words stopped me cold. This stranger, this elderly relative I'd never met, was acknowledging what everyone else had pretended didn't exist. Someone had noticed my exclusion and recognized it as inappropriate. "Thank you," I said, not trusting myself to say more. "I've been coming to society weddings for 70 years, Martha continued. "I've seen all sorts of family dynamics and social complications, but I've never seen a bride's immediate family member seated separately from the ceremony. Quite remarkable, really." She gathered her small purse and moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, dear, dignity isn't something anyone can take from you. It's only something you can give away." After Martha left, I stood alone in the ornate restroom, staring at my reflection while her words echoed in my mind. Dignity isn't something anyone can take from you. It's only something you can give away. I'd been giving away pieces of my dignity for years, accommodating each small exclusion and casual dismissal in the name of family harmony. Each time I'd accepted being treated as less important, less worthy of consideration, I'd handed over another fragment of my self-respect. But Martha was right. The choice was mine. I could continue accepting my family's definition of my worth, or I could reclaim the dignity I'd been surrendering one small compromise at a time. When I returned to the reception, dinner was being served. The tables filled with guests enjoying the first course while the wedding party took their places at the head table. I found my seat between my father and Derek's grandmother, both of whom were deep in conversation with other table occupants. The meal was exquisite, multiple courses served with wine pairings that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in a month. Conversation flowed around me without much attempt at inclusion. Though Derek Montgomery made periodic, polite inquiries about my work and living situation with the air of someone fulfilling social obligations. Maya teaches at a public elementary school, my mother explained to the table during the main course. She's always been so good with children, very nurturing. We keep hoping she'll consider moving into administration or perhaps private education where she might have more impact. The casual dismissal of my career, delivered with a smile to a table full of strangers, felt like a physical blow. In one smooth sentence, my mother had managed to diminish my work while suggesting it was somehow inadequate compared to other options. Public education is so important, Derek's aunt replied diplomatically. Though I imagine it must be quite challenging these days. Maya has always preferred working with disadvantaged populations, my father added, as if my teaching job were a form of charity work rather than a professional choice. She finds it very fulfilling. Disadvantaged populations, as if the 7-year-olds in my classroom were somehow lesser children than those who attended private schools. As if my choice to work in public education reflected limitation rather than commitment. I sat quietly through the rest of dinner, listening to my family reframe my life for an audience of strangers. According to their narrative, I was a well-meaning, but ultimately unsuccessful family member who'd chosen an easy, unchallenging path that allowed her to feel good about herself without achieving anything significant. The version of Maya Carter they presented bore little resemblance to the woman who spent her days helping children discover their capabilities, who stayed after school to tutor struggling readers, who used her own money to buy supplies when the school budget fell short. But that woman didn't fit the family story they needed to tell. During the toasts, Derek's best man spoke eloquently about the couple's love story and bright future. Sophia's maid of honor shared touching memories from their college friendship and praised Derek's devotion to his new wife. My father delivered a brief speech about welcoming Derek into the family and expressing his confidence in their shared success. Nobody mentioned me, not as a sister, not as a family member, not as someone who'd watched Sophia grow up and cared about her happiness. I might as well have been an acquaintance invited out of politeness. As the reception moved into dancing and more casual socializing, I found myself increasingly isolated. The energy required to maintain pleasant conversation with people who clearly considered me irrelevant was exhausting. Every interaction reinforced my position as an outsider, temporarily granted access to events beyond my social station. I was considering leaving early when Sophia appeared at my side, glowing with happiness and champagne. Maya, I haven't had a chance to really talk to you all evening. Are you having a wonderful time? It's a beautiful reception, I said truthfully. You look absolutely radiant. I feel incredible. Everything has been perfect, absolutely perfect. Derek's family is so welcoming, and the ceremony was exactly what we dreamed of. She seemed genuinely unaware that anything about the day might have been difficult for me. In her mind, The wedding had proceeded flawlessly, with every detail executed according to plan. "The viewing area worked out well for you, didn't it?" she continued. "I was so worried you might feel overwhelmed by all the formal protocol inside. But Caroline said you seemed very comfortable out there." "Very comfortable," I echoed, unwilling to spoil her wedding joy with honesty about my experience. "That's such a relief. I know these big events can be stressful for you, so I wanted to make sure you had space to enjoy the ceremony in your own way." Space to enjoy the ceremony in my own way. Through glass doors, alone, like a child deemed too disruptive for the adult celebration. "It was thoughtful of you to consider my comfort," I said, the words tasting bitter as I spoke them. Sophia beamed, apparently taking my response as genuine gratitude rather than sarcasm. "That's what sisters are for, right? Looking out for each other, making sure we're both happy and comfortable." Looking out for each other. The phrase would have been laughable if it weren't so tragic. When had Sophia ever looked out for my comfort or happiness? When had she ever considered my needs as equal to her own? "Maya, there's actually something I wanted to talk to you about," Sophia continued, her voice dropping to a more serious tone. "Derek and I have been discussing family dynamics, and we think it might be helpful if you considered some changes." "What kind of changes?" "Well, Derek's going to be running for state legislature next year, and that means our family will be under more public scrutiny. We'll need to be very careful about our public image, about how we present ourselves as a political family." I felt a familiar chill settling in my stomach. What does that have to do with me? "It's not about you specifically, Maya. It's about all of us adapting to new responsibilities. Derek's campaign manager has already started developing our family narrative for public consumption." Family narrative. As if our relationships were marketing materials to be crafted for public consumption. "And where do I fit in this narrative?" Sophia hesitated, glancing around to make sure we weren't being overheard. "Well, that's what we need to discuss. Your current situation, the teaching job, the apartment. It doesn't really align with the image Derek needs to project." "What image is that?" "Successful, accomplished family members who reflect his values and capabilities. Voters need to see that he comes from a family of achievers, people who've made something of themselves." The implication was clear. In Derek's political narrative, I was a liability, evidence of family mediocrity that might undermine his carefully constructed image. "So, what are you suggesting?" "Derek has connections in private education, some very prestigious schools that might be interested in someone with your experience. The salary would be much better, and you'd be working with a completely different caliber of families. And if I'm not interested in changing jobs?" Sophia's smile faltered slightly. "Maya, you have to understand that this isn't just about personal preferences anymore. Derek's career affects our entire family. We all need to do our part to support his success." Our entire family. Apparently, my comfort and preferences ranked somewhere below Derek's political ambitions on the family priority list. "I love my job, Sophia. I love my students, my school, the work I do. I'm not interested in changing careers to improve your husband's political image." "Don't be dramatic, Maya. Nobody's asking you to sacrifice anything important. We're offering you an opportunity to upgrade your situation, to become part of something bigger than just teaching second grade in a struggling public school. Just teaching second grade." The dismissal was casual and complete, as if the work I'd chosen to dedicate my life to was inherently insignificant. "I should go," I said, suddenly unable to tolerate another moment of the conversation. "Maya, please don't be upset. We're just trying to think about what's best for everyone, including you. Derek has so many connections, so many opportunities he could share with our family." But I was already walking away, moving through the reception, crowd toward the exit. Behind me, I could hear Sophia calling my name, but I didn't turn around. I'd reached my limit. The point where maintaining family relationships required abandoning every principle and preference that made me who I was. In the hotel lobby, I handed my claim ticket to the valet and waited for my modest Honda to appear among the luxury vehicles. The contrast felt symbolic of everything I'd experienced that day. The constant reminder that I didn't belong in this world of careful hierarchies and calculated relationships. As I drove home through the Boston streets, I thought about Martha Pemberton's words. Dignity isn't something anyone can take from you, it's only something you can give away. I'd been giving it away for years, accepting each small humiliation in the name of family harmony. But tonight had shown me the true cost of that strategy. No amount of accommodation would ever be enough. There would always be another request to change, another suggestion for improvement, another way I could better serve the family's interests by abandoning my own. The wedding had been perfect for everyone except me. And for the first time in my adult life, I was ready to admit that maybe perfect for everyone else wasn't good enough anymore. Monday morning arrived with an unexpected phone call that would shatter everything I thought I knew about my family. I was preparing for school, mentally rehearsing how I would explain my early departure from Sophia's wedding to my curious students, when my phone rang at 7:30. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but something compelled me to answer. Miss Carter, this is Detective Patricia Walsh with the Boston Police Department. I'm calling regarding your sister, Sophia. Montgomery. My blood turned to ice. Had something happened after I left the reception? An accident on their way to the honeymoon? My mind raced through terrible possibilities. Is Sophia okay? Has there been an accident? Your sister is fine, Miss Carter. But I need to speak with you about some information that's come to light regarding her wedding weekend. Would it be possible for you to come to the station this morning? I don't understand. What kind of information? Detective Walsh's voice was carefully neutral. I'd prefer to discuss this in person. It involves some financial irregularities. That may affect your family. Can you be here by 9? Financial irregularities. The phrase sent a chill through me, though I couldn't imagine what Sophia's wedding could have to do with police investigations. I called in sick to work and drove to the police station, my mind churning with questions and growing dread. The building was a stark contrast to the elegant hotel where I'd spent the previous evening, all concrete and fluorescent lighting that stripped away any pretense of glamour or sophistication. Detective Walsh met me in a small conference room, a woman in her 40s with graying hair and the tired eyes of someone who'd seen too much human deception. She gestured for me to sit across from her at a metal table covered with file folders and documents. Miss Carter, thank you for coming. I want to assure you that you're not under investigation or suspicion of any wrongdoing. We're hoping you might help us understand some family dynamics that have come to our attention. What kind of family dynamics? Detective Walsh opened one of the file folders. Are you familiar with your father's real estate development company, Carter Properties? Of course. Dad built it from nothing. It's been his life's work for 30 years. What do you know about the company's financial situation? I shifted uncomfortably in the hard plastic chair. I know it's successful. Dad's always been proud of how well the business has done, especially considering he started with nothing. Detective Walsh nodded slowly. Miss Carter, I need to inform you that Carter Properties has been under investigation by the FBI's Financial Crimes Division for the past 8 months. The investigation centers on suspected money laundering, tax evasion, and fraudulent financial reporting. The words hit me like physical blows. My father, the man who'd built his reputation on integrity and hard work, was under federal investigation for financial crimes. That's impossible, I said automatically. My father would never do anything illegal. He's the most honest person I know. I understand this is shocking, but the evidence is substantial. We have records of shell companies, offshore accounts, falsified construction contracts, and systematic underreporting of income spanning nearly a decade. Detective Walsh pulled out a thick document and placed it in front of me. This is a warrant for your father's arrest that will be executed this afternoon. We're also freezing all assets associated with Carter Properties and several personal accounts." I stared at the legal document, the words blurring as I tried to process what I was hearing. My father, who lectured about responsibility and integrity, who criticized my life choices as insufficiently ambitious, was apparently a criminal whose empire was built on fraud. "Why are you telling me this? What does it have to do with Sophia's wedding?" Detective Walsh leaned forward slightly. "The timing of your sister's wedding to Derek Montgomery is not coincidental. Our investigation indicates that your father has been using the wedding and the Montgomery family connection to legitimize assets and create new financial partnerships." "I don't understand." "Derek Montgomery's family has extensive business interests and political connections. Marriage into that family provides your father with new opportunities to hide money and create legitimate-looking business relationships. The wedding wasn't just a social event, Miss Carter. It was a business transaction." The revelation recontextualized everything about the past year. Sophia's engagement to Derek, my parents' enthusiasm about the match, the elaborate wedding that cost more than most people's annual salaries. None of it had been about love or family celebration. It had been about covering up my father's crimes. "Does Sophia know?" I asked quietly. "We believe your sister is aware of at least some aspects of your father's business practices. Financial records show that she's been receiving regular payments from offshore accounts associated with Carter Properties, payments that began shortly after her engagement to Derek Montgomery." Detective Walsh pulled out another document, a bank statement with Sophia's name at the top. The deposits were substantial, tens of thousands of dollars transferred monthly from accounts I'd never heard of. "Your sister has been financially compensated for her marriage to Derek Montgomery," Detective Walsh continued. "The payments are structured to look like family gifts, but they're actually payment for services rendered in legitimizing your father's business operations." I felt sick, physically nauseous as the full scope of what I was learning settled over me. My sister hadn't just married Derek for love. She'd been paid to marry him, compensated for creating the family connections my father needed to hide his crimes. What about my mother? Does she know? Linda Carter has been listed as a corporate officer for several of the shell companies. We believe she's been actively involved in the financial fraud for years. My entire family, everyone, except me, had been part of an elaborate criminal enterprise disguised as a successful real estate business. The wealth I'd been made to feel inadequate about, the social connections I'd been excluded from, the family success I'd been told I didn't measure up to, all of it was built on lies and criminal activity. "Miss Carter, I need to ask you directly. Have you ever been offered money or benefits from Carter Properties? Any unusual gifts or financial assistance from your family?" I almost laughed at the absurdity of the question. "Detective, my family has spent years making it clear that I'm the unsuccessful member who doesn't contribute anything of value. I've never received any financial help from them beyond the occasional birthday check. No job offers, no suggestions that you might work for the company or related businesses. The opposite. They've always made it clear that my teaching career is beneath their standards, that I should aspire to something more significant." Detective Walsh made a note in her file. "That actually supports our theory about your position in the family structure. Your exclusion from their business operations wasn't about your capabilities, Miss Carter. It was about keeping you away from information that could incriminate you." The insight hit me like a revelation. My family hadn't excluded me because I was inadequate. They'd excluded me because I was honest. My presence in their criminal enterprise would have been a liability, someone whose conscience might interfere with their illegal activities. "They protected me by making me feel worthless," I said, the irony bitter in my mouth. "It's more common than you might think. Criminal families often have one member who's kept clean, either deliberately or through natural family dynamics. In your case, your teaching career and modest lifestyle provide perfect cover. Nobody would suspect that the struggling elementary school teacher could be involved in multi-million-dollar fraud. Detective Walsh closed the file folders and leaned back in her chair. Miss Carter, we're going to need you to stay available for questioning as this investigation proceeds. You're not a suspect, but you may be called as a witness to family dynamics and financial patterns. What happens now? Your father will be arrested this afternoon. Your mother and sister will likely be taken into custody within the next few days as evidence is processed. The family assets will be frozen pending investigation, and Carter Properties will be shut down immediately. I sat in the police station parking lot for an hour after leaving Detective Walsh, trying to process the complete destruction of everything I'd believed about my family. The people who'd made me feel small and unsuccessful were criminals. The wealth I'd been made to feel excluded from was stolen money. The family connections I'd never been worthy of were business relationships built on fraud. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Maya, we need to talk. Can you come to the house this afternoon? It's important. They knew. Somehow they knew the investigation was closing in, and now they wanted to talk to me. The daughter they'd dismissed and excluded was suddenly important enough to contact. I drove to my childhood home, a sprawling colonial in an exclusive suburb that I now realized had been purchased with criminal proceeds. The house had always intimidated me with its pristine landscaping and expensive furnishings, symbols of a success I'd been told I lacked the ability to achieve. My mother answered the door looking haggard, her usual perfect appearance replaced by obvious stress and fear. Her hair was uncombed, her makeup minimal, and she wore casual clothes I'd never seen her in before. Maya, thank God you're here. Come in, quickly. The house felt different, charged with tension and panic. In the living room, I found my father pacing frantically while Sophia sat on the couch looking pale and frightened. Derek was notably absent, and I wondered if he knew what was happening to his new in-laws. Maya, my father stopped pacing when he saw me. We have a situation. There are some misunderstandings about the business that we need to address as a family. Misunderstandings. Even facing federal charges, my father couldn't admit to criminal behavior. I know about the investigation, Dad. The police called me this morning. The silence that followed was deafening. My parents exchanged glances, while Sophia stared at me with wide, frightened eyes. What did you tell them? My mother asked sharply. The truth, that I don't know anything about your business operations because you've always excluded me from family finances. My father sank into his favorite chair, suddenly looking older than his 55 years. Maya, you have to understand that everything we did was for the family. To provide opportunities, to create a better life for you and Sophia. By stealing money and committing fraud? It's not that simple. Sophia spoke for the first time, her voice shaky. Dad's business operates in a gray area where sometimes the rules aren't clear. Sometimes you have to be creative with financial structures to compete. Creative with financial structures. The euphemisms they used to describe criminal activity were almost impressive in their elaborate denial. Sophia, you've been receiving payments from offshore accounts. You've been paid to marry Derek to help legitimize Dad's money laundering operation. My sister's face crumpled. It's not like that, Maya. Derek and I love each other. The family. Financial arrangements are separate from our relationship. You were paid to marry him. Oh, I was given family support to help establish our new household. That's normal in wealthy families. You wouldn't understand because you've never been part of this world. Even facing exposure as criminals, my family couldn't stop condescending to me about my lack of sophistication. You're right, I said, standing up. I don't understand this world. I don't understand how you can steal money and call it business. I don't understand how you can pay your daughter to marry someone and call it family support. I don't understand how you can exclude me from your lives and then expect my help when you get caught. Maya, please. My mother's voice was desperate. We need you to understand that we were trying to protect you. We never wanted you involved in the complicated aspects of the business. Because you knew it was criminal. Because we knew you wouldn't be comfortable with the moral ambiguities involved in high-level business operations. Moral ambiguities, another euphemism for fraud and money laundering. So you protected me by making me feel worthless, by excluding me from family events, dismissing my career, treating me like an embarrassment who didn't measure up to family standards. My father looked up from his chair, his expression genuinely confused. Maya, we never meant to make you feel worthless. We were trying to keep you safe. Safe from what? From being part of a loving family? From being included in celebrations? From feeling like I mattered to any of you? Safe from this, Sophia gestured around the room. Safe from facing federal charges and having your life destroyed when everything came crashing down. The admission hung in the air between us. They'd known all along that their criminal enterprise would eventually collapse. They'd excluded me not just to protect their operations, but to protect me from the consequences when they got caught. We need your help now, my mother said quietly. The lawyers say having a family member with a clean reputation could be important for the defense. Someone who can testify about our character, our family values. Family values. The phrase was so absurd I almost laughed. What family values would those be? The value of excluding family members who don't serve your purposes? The value of building wealth through criminal activity? The value of paying your daughter to marry for business connections? Maya, please, my father's voice was broken. We know we made mistakes. We know we haven't always treated you fairly. But we're still family. We still love you. You love me now that you need me. You love me now that my honest reputation might help your criminal defense. But you didn't love me enough to include me in your lives when everything was going well. I walked toward the door, then turned back to face them one more time. I'm not going to help you. I'm not going to testify about your character or family values. I'm not going to pretend that we're a close, loving family to help you avoid the consequences of your crimes. Maya, if you don't help us, we could go to prison, Sophia said, tears streaming down her face. Is that what you want? Your entire family destroyed? You destroyed yourselves. You chose to build your lives on criminal activity. You chose to exclude me from your family until you needed something from me. You chose to treat me as less important, less worthy, less valuable than your business operations. I opened the front door, then paused one more time. And you know what? I'm grateful. I'm grateful that you excluded me. I'm grateful that you made me feel like I didn't belong in your world, because your world is built on lies and crime, and I'm proud that I never belonged to it. The arrest warrant was executed that afternoon while I was back at my apartment. I watched the news coverage from my small living room, seeing my father led away in handcuffs while reporters speculated about the scope of the Carter Properties fraud investigation. The local news portrayed it as a shocking fall from grace for a prominent business family. Photos of my parents at charity events and social gatherings filled the screen, while anchors discussed the multi-million-dollar fraud scheme that had funded their lifestyle. My phone rang constantly throughout the evening. Reporters who'd somehow gotten my number wanted comments about my family's criminal activities. Former colleagues of my parents called seeking gossip and information. Even some of my teaching colleagues reached out, having recognized the Carter family name in the news coverage. I ignored them all, except one call from Derek Montgomery. Maya, I need to speak with you. His voice was tight with stress and anger. About your family's situation and how it affects Sophia and me. I don't think we have anything to discuss, Derek. We have everything to discuss. Do you have any idea what this investigation means for my political career, for my family's reputation? I married into what I thought was a respectable business family, and now I discover they're criminals. The irony was staggering. Derek, who'd married Sophia partly for her family's business connections, was now panicking because those connections were criminal. I'm sorry this is affecting your political ambitions. This isn't about my ambitions, Maya. This is about massive fraud and deception. Sophia took money from your father's criminal enterprise. She was essentially paid to marry me to help legitimize his money laundering operation. I know. The police told me this morning. You knew? And you didn't think to warn me? To tell me that my new wife was part of a criminal conspiracy? I almost laughed at his outrage. Derek, you wanted to marry into a prominent business family for your political career. You got exactly what you wanted. The fact that the prominence was built on criminal activity isn't my responsibility to monitor. Sophia says you're refusing to help with their legal defense, that you won't testify about their character. That's correct. Maya, regardless of our family differences, we need to think about damage control. My career, my family's reputation, everything I've worked for is at risk because of your father's crimes. Damage control. Even in crisis, Derek's primary concern was protecting his image and political future. What exactly are you asking me to do? Work with our lawyers to develop a narrative that minimizes the family connection to the criminal activities. Present yourself as the honest family member who can vouch for their underlying character despite their poor business decisions. Poor business decisions, another euphemism for systematic criminal fraud. No. Maya, be reasonable. You can help your family avoid prison sentences while also protecting my political future. Everyone wins. Everyone except the people your father-in-law stole from. Everyone except the communities harmed by his tax evasion. Everyone except the legitimate businesses that couldn't compete with his fraudulent practices. Derek was quiet for a moment. I didn't realize you felt so strongly about the moral dimensions of this situation. You mean you didn't realize I had a conscience? You're right, Derek. I do have moral objections to helping criminals avoid consequences for their crimes, even when those criminals are my family members. Think about Sophia. Think about how prison would destroy her life, her future, everything she's worked for. Sophia worked for a marketing firm for 3 years before quitting to plan her wedding. She's 26 years old and has been financially supported by criminal proceeds for most of her adult life. Maybe facing consequences for her choices would be good for her character development. After Derek hung up, I sat in my quiet apartment reflecting on the complete transformation of my understanding of my family and my place within it. For 28 years, I'd believed I was the inadequate member who couldn't measure up to their standards of success and sophistication. I'd spent countless hours wondering what was wrong with me, why I couldn't earn their respect and inclusion. Now I understood that my exclusion had been protection, and my honest lifestyle had been a threat to their criminal operations. They'd kept me away not because I was inadequate, but because I was inconvenient. My presence would have complicated their fraud. My conscience would have interfered with their schemes. The wedding I'd been forced to watch through glass doors hadn't been a celebration of love and family unity. It had been a business transaction designed to legitimize criminal proceeds and create new opportunities for money laundering. My exclusion from the ceremony hadn't been about social hierarchies or family status. It had been about keeping the honest family member away from the criminal conspiracy celebration. Over the following weeks, the investigation expanded and deepened. My mother was arrested on charges of conspiracy and money laundering. Sophia was charged with accepting criminal proceeds and participating in fraudulent financial transactions. Derek hired expensive lawyers and began publicly distancing himself from his new in-laws, claiming he'd been deceived about their business practices. The media coverage was extensive and brutal. Society pages that had celebrated Sophia's wedding now detailed the criminal charges against the Carter family. Photos from the elegant reception were juxtaposed with mugshots and perp walks. The fairy tale wedding had become a cautionary tale about corruption and deception in Boston's elite social circles. I received one final call from Sophia the night before her arraignment. She was calling from Derek's apartment, where she was staying while out on bail. "Maya, I know you're angry with us. I know you feel like we treated you badly over the years. But please, I'm begging you to reconsider helping with our defense. Sophia, I'm not angry with you. I'm disappointed, but I'm not angry. Then, why won't you help us? Because helping you would mean lying about who you are and what you've done. It would mean pretending that your crimes were mistakes rather than deliberate choices. It would mean validating a system that treats honesty as weakness and criminal behavior as sophistication. Maya, we're family. Doesn't that mean anything to you? I thought about the question carefully before answering. Family means something. To me, Sophia. It means including people in celebrations, not excluding them. It means treating each other with respect, not condescension. It means supporting each other's honest achievements, not just criminal enterprises. But we are family, regardless of our mistakes. You made me feel like I wasn't family for my entire adult life. You excluded me from your wedding ceremony, dismissed my career, and made it clear that I didn't measure up to your standards. Now that you need something from me, suddenly family loyalty matters. Sophia was crying audibly now. Maya, I'm sorry about the wedding. I'm sorry about how we treated you. We were wrong, and I know that now. But please don't let our mistakes destroy any chance of rebuilding our relationship. Sophia, our relationship was destroyed years ago when you decided that my honesty made me unsuitable for your world. The wedding was just the final demonstration of how little I mattered to any of you. That's not true. You've always mattered to us. I mattered so little that you created an elaborate fraud scheme around me without ever considering whether I might want to be included in your real lives rather than your criminal activities. The conversation ended with Sophia sobbing and me feeling nothing but exhaustion. The family that had shaped my entire understanding of my own worth had revealed itself to be built on lies, crime, and manipulation. The exclusion that had caused me so much pain had actually been protection from their corruption. 6 months later, my father was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for money laundering, tax evasion, and fraudulent business practices. My mother received 8 years for conspiracy and participating in criminal financial transactions. Sophia accepted a plea bargain that resulted in 3 years in minimum security prison and extensive community service. Derek divorced Sophia before her sentencing, claiming that her deception about her family's criminal activities had invalidated their marriage. His political career survived with minimal damage, helped by his quick public separation from the Carter family and his cooperation with federal investigators. The family assets were seized and liquidated to pay restitution to victims of my father's fraud. The house where I'd grown up was sold at auction, along with the vacation properties, expensive cars, and luxury items that had defined my family's lifestyle. Everything they'd built over 30 years of criminal activity was dismantled and redistributed. I kept teaching second grade at Roosevelt Elementary, finding deep satisfaction in work that valued honesty, creativity, and genuine care for others. My students didn't know or care about my family's criminal history. They only knew that I helped them learn to read, celebrated their artistic achievements, and created a classroom environment where every child felt valued and included. Alex and I moved in together that fall, creating a home based on authentic connection rather than social positioning or financial status. He'd supported me through the entire investigation and trial process, never wavering in his commitment despite the media attention and social complications that came with dating a member of a notorious criminal family. One evening, the following spring, as we prepared dinner in our small kitchen, I reflected on how completely my understanding of success and family had transformed over the past year. "Do you ever regret not helping them?" Alex asked, clearly thinking about my family's situation. "No," I said without hesitation. "I regret that they were criminals. I regret that they built their lives on fraud and deception. I regret that they excluded me from their honest affection while including me in their need for manipulation. But I don't regret refusing to help them avoid consequences for their choices." even though they're your family? They stopped being my family when they decided that my honesty made me unsuitable for their world. The wedding was just the moment when I finally understood what they'd been telling me all along. That night, I looked through old photo albums one final time before boxing them away. The pictures told a different story now that I understood the context behind them. The family vacations had been funded by criminal proceeds. The elegant dinner parties had been opportunities to launder money and develop new criminal partnerships. The social connections I'd been excluded from had been business relationships built on fraud. In every photo, I could now see my isolation, not as evidence of my inadequacy, but as proof of my integrity. My family had kept me away from their criminal world because my presence would have been inconvenient, my conscience a liability to their operations. The wedding that had seemed like the ultimate rejection had actually been protection. One final attempt to keep me away from their criminal activities before everything collapsed. My exclusion from the ceremony hadn't been about my social status or family value. It had been about keeping the honest family member away from the criminal conspiracy celebration. I closed the photo albums and put them away, finally ready to build a life based on my own values, rather than seeking approval from people whose values were fundamentally corrupt. The family that had made me feel worthless had revealed themselves to be without worth. The standards they'd demanded I meet had been exposed as criminal deception. Walking away from that wedding had been the first step toward walking away from a lifetime of manipulation and exclusion. Refusing to help them had been the final step toward claiming my own dignity and integrity. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is refuse to enable their destruction of themselves and others. Sometimes dignity requires walking away from people who treat your honesty as inconvenience and your conscience as weakness. My family had taught me that success was about accumulating wealth and social connections regardless of the methods used to obtain them. But they'd been wrong about success, just as they'd been wrong about family, love, and the meaning of achievement. Real success was the satisfaction I felt when a struggling student finally understood a difficult concept. Real family was the community I'd built with Alex and my teaching colleagues, who valued each other for character rather than connections. Real achievement was building a life based on honesty and service rather than fraud and manipulation. Wedding I'd been excluded from had destroyed everything my family pretended to value. But it had also freed me to discover what I actually valued, what kind of life I wanted to build, and what kind of person I wanted to be. They'd tried to make me small by excluding me from their world, but their world had been built on lies, crime, and the systematic destruction of everything genuine and honest. Being excluded from that world wasn't rejection. It was salvation. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.